My name is Nora. I'm 39 years old, and for the last 14 years, I worked as a process optimization engineer at a logistics company based in Texas. Most people didn't know my name, and honestly, that was fine with me for a while. I wasn't the kind who needed applause. I believed in doing good work, keeping my head down, and trusting that someday someone would notice. And in the beginning, I really thought that's how the world worked. I came in early, stayed late, skipped lunch, and answered emails at midnight. I rewrote outdated systems, patched holes in operations, and built custom scripts to automate tasks that used to take whole teams' days to finish. I watched as my department shrank around me, not because there was less work, but because I'd made it efficient enough for one person to handle. I didn't complain. When someone got promoted above me, I figured they probably had connections or skills I didn't. When bonuses were handed out, and I got a generic email instead, I told myself maybe next quarter. When someone forgot my name in meetings, I smiled and reintroduced myself like it didn't sting a little every time. The truth is, I thought loyalty mattered. My dad worked 30 years at a refinery without missing a day, even when he had the flu. He used to say that if you give your best, people will see it. My mom believed that too. I carried that idea like a rule book no one else had read. There were moments I wondered if I should speak up more, push harder, and ask for what I deserved. But I always pulled back. I didn't want to seem difficult or ungrateful. I thought being a good worker meant staying quiet and letting your performance speak. And for years, I did just that. I filled notebooks with solutions, sketched out models on weekends, and quietly fixed problems no one else knew how to name. Sometimes, I would sit alone in the break room and watch others get recognition for things I'd helped design behind the scenes. Still, I waited. It wasn't that I didn't know my worth. I just thought the right people would eventually recognize it. That someone would one day walk into my cubicle, thank me, and say, "We've been paying attention." But that day never came. What did come was a moment I'll never forget. One laugh. One sentence that broke whatever was left of the hope I'd been holding on to. And that's when everything changed. His office smelled faintly of cedar and fresh coffee. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the space like a crown, framing the skyline and making everything inside feel distant, even the people. I sat across from him, my folder clutched tightly in my lap, pages bending slightly from the pressure of my fingers. I had rehearsed what I'd say a dozen times. My voice came out steadier than I expected. I told him I'd like to discuss a salary adjustment, an 8% increase based on performance metrics, workload, and current market benchmarks for my role. He looked up from his laptop, blinking slowly like I'd interrupted something mildly amusing. Then he leaned back, a smirk forming at the corners of his mouth. He repeated the word like he wasn't sure he heard me right. 8%, I nodded. I'd prepared charts, project outcomes, cost reductions, efficiency gains tied directly to my systems. But before I could offer any of it, he laughed. It wasn't a small chuckle. It was full-bodied from the gut, like I'd told the best joke he'd heard all week. The sound bounced off the glass walls and echoed into the silence that followed. My throat tightened. My ears burned. "Do you want an 8% raise after 14 years? His laughter came again, sharper now. I sat there frozen, the portfolio trembling in my lap. He waved a hand like he was brushing away a gnat. "Everyone's replaceable, you know. Even you." His voice had softened, but the words cut deeper than if he'd shouted. He smiled, that polished executive smile, perfectly rehearsed, perfectly hollow. The kind of smile that never touched the eyes. I felt something shift inside me. Not heartbreak, not quite. It was older than that, something deeper. The slow erosion of loyalty finally cracks under pressure. 14 years of staying late, fixing mistakes I didn't make, and creating systems that saved millions. And now this. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but nothing came. My fingers tightened around the folder as if it could hold together everything inside me that was trying to break. He leaned forward like he was doing me a favor by explaining the obvious. "Look, you're good at what you do. But let's be honest. You're a behind-the-scenes type. The board doesn't even know your name. That's just how business works." I nodded, but it wasn't agreement. It was the kind of nod people give, when they realize the conversation is over and they've just been dismissed. I stood up slowly, the folder still in my hands. I told him I understood. My voice didn't shake, but it didn't feel like mine either. He offered a final comment as I turned to leave. "Don't take it personally, it's just numbers." I didn't respond. I walked out past the assistants who didn't look up past the trophy wall where his face was framed in every group photo. Back at my desk, I sat without moving for a while. My screen lit up with a new company memo praising leadership for operational excellence. The featured quote was from him, attributing recent success to bold vision and strategic insight. My code had made that success possible. My late nights, my unpaid weekends. I looked around the nearly empty office. Most of my team was gone, downsized, automated by the same systems I had built. I reached for my coffee now, cold, and thought about how long I had waited for something as basic as recognition. He laughed. That's what I kept coming back to. He laughed at me, not just at the raise, the idea that I believed I had value, that I thought I deserved more than silence and invisibility. And in that moment, sitting in my corner cubicle under fluorescent lights, I realized something that would change everything. He wasn't wrong about me being replaceable, but neither was he safe from the consequences of forgetting who built the machine he sat on top of. At the bottom drawer of my desk, beneath old tech manuals and expired security badges, I kept a small black notebook. The leather was worn at the edges, corners curled from being pulled out and put back hundreds of times. Inside were the things no one else ever saw. It started as a place to track ideas I didn't want to lose. Bits of code that sparked in the middle of a meeting. Diagrams I scribbled late at night while the TV hummed in the background. Some pages were rough, barely legible from rushed handwriting. Others were neat and color-coded with flowcharts and timestamps. Most of what filled that book came from hours outside the office. Weekend mornings when I couldn't sleep. Evenings after dinner when my mind wouldn't let go of a problem. I'd sit at my kitchen table, laptop open, coffee going cold, and just build. Over the years, it turned into something more than notes. It was a quiet record of my growth, my experiments, my wins. Systems no one asked for but everyone eventually used. Predictive models that caught shipment delays before they happened. Optimization tools that turned a bloated inventory system into a streamlined machine. I never gave the company access to that notebook. Not because I was trying to hide anything, but because no one ever asked. The contract I signed when I joined only covered work done during company time on company equipment. What lived in that notebook was mine. I checked the legal language more than once. I had it reviewed after one particularly complicated tool I'd designed on my own laptop started showing up in internal presentations. There were no clauses covering after-hours personal development, no ownership claims unless it was done under direct assignment or with corporate resources. So, I kept documenting, not out of fear, but because I knew what I was building mattered. I made sure every major breakthrough had a date. Every tool had a description. I listed where I wrote the code, what machine I used, and even the hours I spent. I didn't talk about it at work. When one of my weekend models quietly got adopted into our shipping forecast system, I didn't push back. I let it happen. I just noted it in the book, logged the overlap, and moved on. There was power in that silence. I wasn't naive. I knew that someday I might need proof. Not of my talent, but of my ownership. So I treated that notebook like insurance. And it turned out I would need it much sooner than I thought. After the meeting with the CEO, I went home, pulled it from my bag, and laid it on the table like a deck of cards. Flipping through the pages, I saw the last 5 years of my life spelled out in diagrams and code. My ideas, my effort, my legacy. And for the first time, I saw it not as a hobby, but as leverage. Because what no one in that glass office realized was that the engine running their entire supply chain had come from these pages, and I had never signed it away. I stared at the name on my phone screen for a long time before tapping call. Marcus Langston, Director of Operations at Zenith Freight. He'd reached out 3 times over the past 2 years, each message more generous than the last. The last one was still saved in my inbox. "We're building something big. I think you should be a part of it. I never replied. Not because I wasn't tempted, but because back then, I still believed I owed something to the place I'd given my best years. Now, after the laughter, after the dismissal, I felt none of that loyalty left. Only a quiet resolve. When the call connected, my voice didn't shake. This is Nora. I believe we should finally have that conversation. There was a pause on the other end, then a voice filled with warmth and surprise. I was beginning to think you never would. The words didn't feel rehearsed. They felt real. He asked if I could meet that evening, said he'd book a table somewhere quiet. I hesitated for less than a breath before agreeing. I already knew my answer. I just hadn't said it out loud yet. We met at a place I'd only ever walked past, the kind of restaurant with white tablecloths and low lighting. He stood as I approached, smiled without condescension, and pulled out the chair across from him. His first words weren't about money. They were about respect. I've followed your work for years. Or more accurately, I've followed the sudden leaps in your company's performance. The timing always seemed to trace back to projects that weren't officially credited. My stomach tightened. He saw me, really saw me. Then he made his offer. Triple my current salary. Full leadership authority over a new logistics R&D team, stock options, a patent incentive program, and most importantly, my name on everything I created. I let the words sink in. For a long time, I'd told myself recognition didn't matter, that doing good work was enough. But as I sat across from someone who valued what I brought to the table, I realized how hungry I was to be seen. I reached into my bag and placed the black notebook gently between us. This is my work, built outside company hours, on my own equipment, and never formally acquired by them. He nodded slowly, understanding what it meant. What I was offering wasn't just talent, it was a transformation. We can draft a fair acquisition agreement, full IP protection, and proper compensation. We don't believe in taking what isn't ours. My chest eased at those words. I believed him. Not because he sounded convincing, but because he didn't have to say it. He chose to. When the check came, he paid without ceremony. No pitch, no pressure. Just a man who saw the value and treated it accordingly. As we stood to leave, he said one last thing. You won't just be another name here. You'll be the reason we lead. Walking to my car, I felt weightless. Not because everything had suddenly been solved, but because for the first time in 14 years, I'd chosen myself. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. That call didn't just change my job. It shifted the axis of my life, and there was no turning back. I stepped into his office just after 9, envelope in hand, the same way I'd entered 100 times before. But this time felt different. The air was still the light harsher somehow, and every sound, the click of my heels, the quiet thud of the door seemed sharper. He didn't look up right away, just nodded toward a chair without taking his eyes off his screen. I stayed standing and placed the envelope on the edge of his desk, within reach but not too close. That got his attention. He glanced down, then up, brow furrowed as if trying to place what this could possibly be. His fingers tapped once on the keyboard, then stopped. He opened the envelope, pulled out the single sheet, and scanned it quickly. 2 weeks' notice. The silence stretched, then his eyes lifted to mine. Where are you going? His voice was tight, controlled. I considered softening the truth but decided against it. Zenith Freight. Marcus Langston made the offer personally. His face didn't move, but I saw it in the eyes. The flicker. The calculation. You do realize we're finalizing our contract with Coastline Logistics next month. You're part of that build, I know. I designed the predictive delivery model that's at the core of the proposal. I could see him replaying every decision, every oversight. He leaned back, slightly arms crossed. We can revisit your raise. If it's compensation that's the issue, it's not. I didn't pause to soften it. The offer includes a leadership role, stock options, and 3 times my current salary. His laugh came too quickly. Hollow, not like before. They're overpaying. You'll be disappointed when you realize you can't deliver what they expect. I smiled, and this time it was real. We'll see. His face fell, but I was already turning to leave. Back at my desk, everything felt clearer. The noise of doubt was gone. I started drafting handover notes labeling files and organizing systems someone else would soon inherit. No bitterness, just precision. Over the next few days, people asked quiet questions. Where was I going? Why now? I answered honestly, but without drama. It wasn't about revenge, it was about return. Each morning felt lighter, each hour closer to freedom, and every time I passed his office, I could feel the shift. He didn't call me in again, didn't follow up, but his door stayed closed longer than usual. I trained my replacement carefully. A young analyst fresh out of grad school, eyes wide and shoulders tight. I showed him the flow, the code, the shortcuts only I knew. He asked questions. I answered them all. When he asked how I built such efficient models, I pointed to the drawer where my notebook used to be and said outside the box. He smiled, not understanding the full meaning. But someday he might. My last Friday came fast. I left a clean desk, a locked account, and no unfinished threads. As I walked out, the glass doors reflected back someone I hadn't seen in years. Not just a worker, but a woman who had finally chosen herself. And nothing about that felt like a loss. The exit interview was scheduled for 10 a.m. in a quiet conference room I'd never sat in before. It smelled faintly of laminate and old coffee, like most places designed for things no one really wanted to talk about. Vernon, the company's legal counsel, sat across from me. He wore the same polite expression I'd seen in every compliance video. A stack of papers waited between us, the top sheet already marked with my name. He walked me through the basics: confidentiality, final paycheck, company property. Then came the last item, a non-compete agreement slid forward like a casual afterthought. Standard procedure, he said. I didn't touch the pen. This wasn't part of my original employment contract, I said. I'm not signing it now. Vernon blinked, caught off guard by the calm in my voice. It's just a formality, he replied, though his tone lost some of its ease. I shook my head. I've reviewed the legal terms. Nothing binds me to this, and I'm not agreeing to restrict future employment based on convenience. He hesitated, clearly not expecting pushback. Then he asked if I planned to take anything with me. That's when I opened the folder in my lap and laid out copies of my personal project documentation. I developed these algorithms on my own time, on my own equipment. They were never part of any assigned task or formal acquisition process. His eyes moved down the page, then back up at me. You implemented these at the company, he said. Yes, I did, but without any formal transfer of ownership. I have emails, timestamps, and even hardware logs to verify it. He didn't speak for several seconds, just flipped through the pages, slowly, recognition dawning as the weight of what he held became clear. These systems weren't just useful. They were the backbone of the company's operations. I'm not taking anything that belongs to Porter. I said it evenly.
I'm taking what belongs to me.
Vernon closed the folder, carefully set it aside, and adjusted his glasses. I need to make a few calls, he said quietly. I stood, thanked him, and walked out without another word. I didn't need permission. I had preparation. And now I had power. By the end of my second week at Zenith, the difference in atmosphere was impossible to ignore. People asked questions and actually listened to the answers. My office wasn't just a room with a door, it was a space where ideas were expected to grow. We began implementation immediately. I rolled out my predictive load balancing system in 2 pilot regions, and within 3 weeks, delivery times dropped by 22%. By the 5th week, overall operating costs fell by nearly 30% in those areas alone. The sales team was ecstatic. They took our data into meetings with clients who had long been locked into contracts with Porter. One by one, those conversations shifted from maybe to yes. It wasn't just that the numbers were better. It was that we could explain why and how with clarity and confidence. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The work spoke for itself. When Coastline Logistics, Porter's largest shipping client, requested a meeting with Zenith's leadership, I was invited to sit at the table. They wanted to know more about our systems. A week later, they made it official. They were ending their contract with Porter and moving all shipments to Zenith. I received the news on a Thursday morning while updating model parameters in a shared document. I stared at the confirmation email for a moment, then simply nodded and kept typing. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. The caller ID showed a name I hadn't seen since my last day at Porter. I let it ring. Then ring again and again. He left a voicemail, the first of several. His voice sounded different, tighter, urgent. He wanted to discuss potential consulting opportunities. There was a generous offer, a willingness to reframe past misunderstandings. I didn't reply. I didn't delete the message either. I saved it like a trophy I didn't need to display. My silence said everything he needed to hear. Each day brought new wins. My team expanded from 3 to 7. We secured another contract from a client who'd quietly grown tired of Porter's slow adaptation. Marcus stopped by my office at the end of the month with 2 simple words. You delivered, and I had. Not just the data, not just the systems, but the proof that all those years of quiet work hadn't been wasted. They'd just been waiting for the right place to thrive. She showed up unannounced one afternoon, standing just outside my office, with her purse clutched tightly in both hands. It took me a second to place her. Dana from procurement. We used to sit across from each other in those long gray cubicles. She looked thinner now, tired. I offered her a seat, but she stayed standing. Her eyes scanned the room, lingering on the nameplate by the door, the soft lighting, the plants someone had placed with care. She didn't speak right away. Then she said it plainly. Porter's folding, 100 people are gone, and everyone says it's because of you. The words hit harder than I expected. I opened my mouth, then closed it. What could I say? She wasn't wrong. Not entirely. My departure had pulled more than just code from their system. It had revealed just how brittle everything was. I told her the truth, that I didn't take anything that wasn't mine. I built those systems on my own time, documented them, and protected them. That I had simply said no to being overlooked again. She nodded slowly but didn't respond. Then she asked the question I'd been avoiding since the calls started. Was it worth it? I wanted to say yes. That standing up for yourself should never come with guilt. But her eyes held too much pain, and I couldn't lie. I told her I didn't expect this. I didn't want people like her to suffer. That I just wanted what I had earned. She stayed quiet for a long time. Then she turned and left without another word. I sat there for a while after she was gone, staring at the empty chair. The air felt heavier. Success had its own weight, and sometimes the hardest part wasn't getting what you deserve. It was realizing that your freedom might come at someone else's cost. It started with a spreadsheet. After Dana left my office, I sat down that night and made a list of every former coworker I could remember. Their names, their roles, what I knew about their skills, where they might be now. By midnight, I had a database of 87 people. Some I had worked with for years, others only briefly. But they were all part of the same machine I had helped run. People who'd been left behind not because they failed, but because someone at the top never saw their value. The next morning, I walked into Marcus's office and placed the file on his desk. I told him I had an idea, a program to hire and retrain former Porter employees. We'd call it Operation Phoenix, not because they needed saving, but because some things deserve a second rise. He listened carefully, then he nodded. Let's do it. Within a week, HR had a landing page up. Job fairs were scheduled. We partnered with a training firm to offer free workshops on updated systems and logistics software. Some hires came quickly, others took convincing. Not everyone wanted to work with someone they blamed for what happened. I understood, so we created paths for everyone. Full-time roles, part-time contracts, consulting arrangements. If they still loved the work, we'd find space for them to thrive. News outlets picked up the story. Business Weekly called it one of the boldest corporate responsibility moves of the year. Clients asked about it in meetings, nodding in approval when we explained the model. Marcus leaned into the attention, but always gave credit back to the team. And to me. Every time a former colleague walked through the doors at Zenith, I felt something lift. Not guilt, not pride. Just a sense of balance returning. Like the story wasn't just about one person's win. It was about repairing something that should have never broken in the first place. We didn't hire everyone, But we tried, and for the ones we couldn't bring on, we funded placement services and provided letters of recommendation. We did what Porter never did. We saw people, we valued them, and we acted on that value. That was the moment I stopped thinking about what I lost, or even what I had gained, and started focusing on what we could build, together, from the ashes of something broken, something better. The call came late on a Tuesday. I recognized the number right away, but still hesitated before answering. His voice was slower than I remembered, measured. He said he wasn't calling for himself. He didn't want to argue or explain. He just needed to ask for help. Porter was filing for bankruptcy. The final round of layoffs had been announced. Severance packages were uncertain. He wanted to know if Zenith's rebound program could be extended to cover some of the remaining staff, people who had nowhere else to go. I sat in silence for a few seconds. It wasn't the request that caught me off guard. It was the tone. There was no trace of pride, just exhaustion, regret, something he'd probably never let anyone else hear. I told him yes. We'd consider every qualified candidate, that anyone we couldn't hire we'd support through referrals and training just like we had before. Not because he asked, but because those people mattered. He thanked me, quietly, then hung up. No long goodbye. No apology. Just a man realizing too late what leadership really looks like. I sat with that moment longer than I expected. Not because it felt like a victory, but because it didn't. It felt like closure, like I'd finally seen what I needed to see to let the whole thing go. Not everyone gets a second chance, but sometimes the best thing you can do is make sure someone else gets theirs. That's what I chose, not to win, but to be the kind of leader I used to wait for. The night I accepted the Innovation Award, the lights felt too bright. Cameras flashed as I walked up to the stage holding the plaque that bore my name. I looked out at the room and saw faces I once passed in quiet hallways, now sitting among the crowd wearing Zenith badges. I spoke briefly. It is not about code or strategy, but about people, about the ones who build quietly in the background, who never ask for credit but deserve it anyway. Afterward, during the reception, a young woman approached me. She couldn't have been more than 24, nervous, polite, clutching her portfolio like it might float away. She said she'd just started in systems development. Then she asked the question that stayed with me for days. How do you know when to stand up for yourself? I paused before answering, not because I didn't know, but because I knew too well. I told her the truth. You know when silence stops being strength and starts becoming surrender. I waited 14 years. I stayed quiet, worked hard, and hoped someone would notice. They didn't, and I paid for that silence with time I'll never get back. But once I realized I didn't need permission to claim my worth, everything shifted. It's not about being loud or dramatic. It's about recognizing when your loyalty is only flowing one way, and being brave enough to change that even if it's uncomfortable. She nodded, her expression soft but determined. I watched her walk away and hoped she wouldn't wait as long as I did. That she'd learn earlier, that took me years to understand. As I stood there holding the award in my hands, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady, centered, like someone who had finally come home to herself. If you're watching this wondering if your value is being seen, ask yourself one thing. Would they notice if you stopped showing up? And if the answer hurts, maybe it's time to rewrite the story. Because knowing your worth isn't arrogance, it's clarity. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to be treated as replaceable.